In the very beginning, before time had a name, there was nothing like we know it. The vast expanse of the universe was dark and empty. There was no shape, no form, just a deep, quiet emptiness stretching out everywhere. It was a state of not yet, waiting for something to begin. This was the state of things before anything was made. The world, as we understand it, had not yet come to be. It was a blank canvas, a space without any stars, planets, or even the ground beneath our feet. All was still and waiting. The main character in this story is God. God is the one who existed before everything else and had the power to bring everything into being. God's presence was there, even in the emptiness, ready to start the great work of creation. The situation before anything was made was one of pure potential. The earth was without form and void. It was a place that needed order, light, and life. Everything that makes our world beautiful and functional was yet to be imagined and brought forth. Then, God spoke. These were not just sounds, but words of power that held immense creative energy. God said, "Let there be light," and just like that, light appeared. This divine instruction was the spark that ignited the universe. Following this command, God began to bring things into existence. God spoke, and one thing after another came into being. The darkness was pushed back, and the first of many wonderful things started to form. It was an act of pure will and intention. The main challenge was to bring order to the vast emptiness. From the formless void, God had to create structure, separation, and substance. It was like taking all the scattered pieces of a puzzle and arranging them into a perfect picture. The key turning point was the creation of light and then life. Light separated the day from the night, bringing the first sense of time and rhythm. Then, God brought forth plants, animals, and finally, beings that could care for this new world. The immediate consequences were dramatic. The dark, empty void began to fill with light and color. Seas formed, land appeared, and the sky stretched out above. The world began to take shape, becoming a place of wonder and beauty. Over time, this creation continued to develop. The sun, moon, and stars were placed in the sky. The waters teemed with creatures, the air was filled with birds, and the land was covered with plants and animals. Day after day, the world grew more complete and full of life. The core lesson from this beginning is that order comes from divine will. When God speaks, things happen. God's intention and power are the source of all that exists, bringing beauty, purpose, and structure to the universe. And so, the creation was completed. The world, once formless and empty, was now a vibrant and organized place, ready for all that would follow. It was a magnificent beginning, showing the power and beauty of a world brought into being by divine command. This is the story of the very first people, Adam and Eve, and their life in a special place called the Garden of Eden. It was a beautiful garden, filled with every kind of tree and plant you can imagine. Everything was perfect, and it was all created by God. Long ago, before cities and countries, God made the world. He made the sky, the land, the oceans, and all the living creatures. Then, God decided to make people. He made the first man, Adam, from the dust of the ground. God breathed life into Adam, and he became a living being. God placed Adam in a wonderful garden called Eden. It was a place of peace and beauty. Adam was meant to care for the garden. He had everything he needed. He was not alone for long, as God saw that it wasn't good for Adam to be by himself. God created many animals, and Adam gave them names. But none of the animals were quite right for Adam. So, God made another person, the first woman, Eve, from one of Adam's ribs. Adam and Eve were made to be companions for each other, and to live together in the garden. In the center of the Garden of Eden, God planted two very special trees. One was the tree of life, and the other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God told Adam and Eve that they could eat from any tree in the garden, but there was one rule. They were not allowed to eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God warned them that if they ate from it, they would surely die. Adam and Eve lived happily in the garden. They talked with each other, explored the beautiful surroundings, and enjoyed all the good things God had provided. They lived in perfect harmony with God and with all the creatures in the garden. They had no worries and no sadness. One day, a serpent, which was a clever creature, approached Eve. The serpent asked Eve if it was true that God said they couldn't eat from any tree. Eve explained God's rule about the special tree in the middle of the garden. The serpent then told Eve that they would not die if they ate the fruit. Instead, it said their eyes would be opened, and they would be like God, knowing good and evil. Eve looked at the tree. The fruit looked delicious, and she thought about what the serpent had said. She reached out and took some of the fruit. She ate it, and then she gave some to Adam, and he ate it too. They had broken God's one command. As soon as they ate the fruit, something changed. Adam and Eve suddenly realized they were naked. They felt a new feeling they hadn't known before: shame. They had lost their innocence. They knew they had done something wrong. When they heard God walking in the garden, they hid. God called out to Adam, asking where he was. Adam explained that he was hiding because he was naked. God then asked if they had eaten from the tree he had forbidden. Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent. Because they chose to disobey God, Adam and Eve could no longer stay in the Garden of Eden. God told them they had to leave. They had to go out into the world and work to grow their own food. The path back to the Garden of Eden was guarded, so they could not return. This story teaches us that when God gives us instructions, it is important to listen. Adam and Eve learned that choices have consequences. Even though they had to leave the beautiful garden, they continued to live and have families, and the story of humanity began from there. In a time long ago, on the ancient earth, lived people across many lands. The world was a busy place, filled with mountains, valleys, and great bodies of water. It was a world that God had made, and it was meant to be a good place. But as time went on, the hearts of many people began to change. The people of that time were not living in kindness. They had forgotten the ways of peace and gentleness. Their actions had become unkind and sometimes even harmful. Life on earth was not as God had intended, and a cloud of unhappiness seemed to hang over the world. This was the situation for many generations. Among these people lived a man named Noah. Noah was different. He was a good and kind man who walked with God in his daily life. Noah lived with his wife and their 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. They were a family who tried their best to live with honesty and care for one another and for the world around them. For a long time, things continued as they were. The world outside Noah's home carried on in its usual ways. Noah and his family lived their lives, working, raising their children, and honoring God. This routine felt familiar and steady, a pattern that had been in place for many years. Then, one day, God spoke to Noah. God saw the way the world had turned and decided something needed to be done. God told Noah a great flood was coming to cleanse the earth. But God also wanted to save Noah and his family, and all kinds of animals. So, God gave Noah a very important instruction: build a large boat, an ark. Noah listened carefully to God's words. He understood that this was a task of great importance. Noah began his work. He started gathering materials and planning the construction of the enormous ark that God had described. He followed God's specific instructions about its size and shape. It was a long and difficult job. The task was immense. Building such a large vessel would take years, and Noah had to work diligently every day. Besides the sheer scale of the construction, there was the challenge of others. Many people around Noah did not understand his work. They did not believe what he was being told and continued with their own lives, perhaps even mocking Noah's efforts. After a very long time, the ark was finally finished, exactly as God had commanded. Noah then followed God's next instruction. He gathered his family, and together they began bringing pairs of every kind of animal into the ark. It was a careful and steady process, ensuring all the creatures were safe inside. As Noah and his family, along with all the animals, were safely inside the ark, the rain began to fall. It rained, and the waters rose higher and higher. The flood covered the entire earth, just as God had said. All living things outside the ark perished. God was the one who closed the door of the ark, keeping Noah and all those inside safe. For many, many days and nights, the ark floated on the vast waters. Inside, Noah and his family cared for the animals, and they waited. Eventually, the rain stopped, and the waters began to go down. The ark eventually came to rest on a mountaintop. Noah sent out birds to see if the land was dry, and when a dove returned with an olive leaf, they knew life was returning to the earth. After a long time, the ground dried, and God told Noah it was time to leave the ark. Noah, his family, and all the animals stepped out onto the newly cleansed earth. God made a promise to Noah and all living creatures, setting a rainbow in the sky as a sign of this covenant, a promise that such a flood would never happen again. The earth began to flourish once more. This story teaches us that when we listen to God and obey, even when the task is difficult and others may not understand, God keeps His promises. God cherishes life and provides a way through the hardest times, showing us the importance of faithfulness and perseverance, and the hope of a new beginning. In the earliest days after the Great Flood, all the people on earth lived together in one place. They had settled in a broad, fertile valley called Shinar. It was a peaceful time, and the land was rich and good, providing everything they needed. The sky above was vast and blue, and the sun warmed the earth. Before this time, after the flood waters receded, humanity had begun to regrow and spread across the land. Generations had passed, and people learned to work together, to farm the land, and to build simple homes. They had a shared history and a common way of life, living in relative peace and harmony as their numbers grew. At this time, all of humanity shared one single language. This meant everyone could understand each other perfectly, no matter where they came from or what they did. Communication was easy and clear, allowing people to cooperate and share ideas without any difficulty, fostering a strong sense of unity. The people in the valley of Shinar were very organized. They decided to undertake a large project together. They had learned the skills to make bricks from clay and to bake them hard in fires, and they had also learned to use bitumen, a sticky natural tar, as mortar. This allowed them to build stronger and taller structures than before. One day, the people had a shared idea. They said to each other, "Let's make bricks and bake them well. Then, let's build a city for ourselves, and a tower that reaches all the way to the sky." They wanted to make a name for themselves and stay together in one place, to avoid being scattered across the whole earth. So, they began their work with great enthusiasm. They gathered clay from the earth and mixed it with water. They shaped the clay into bricks and placed them in the sun or in kilns to bake them until they were hard and strong. Then, they began to stack these bricks, using the sticky bitumen to hold them together, layer by layer. As they built higher and higher, the task became quite difficult. The tower was meant to be incredibly tall, and working at such heights required great effort and careful planning. The sheer scale of their ambition meant that the building process was long and demanding, with many hands working together. The Creator, observing their efforts, saw that their motivation was not simply cooperation, but also a growing sense of pride and a desire to reach the heavens without regard for boundaries. The Creator understood that this ambition, fueled by pride, could lead humanity down a path where they relied only on themselves and forgot their dependence on the Creator and the natural order. To help humanity remember their place and to prevent their pride from becoming too great, the Creator decided to intervene in a gentle way. The Creator said, "Indeed, the people are one and they all have one language. This is just the beginning of what they will do. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." And so, it happened. The people who had been speaking the same language suddenly found they could no longer understand one another. One person would speak, and another would hear a completely different sound, a language they had never heard before. Confusion spread through the worksite as people tried to communicate their instructions and ideas. Because they could no longer understand each other, the people had to stop building the tower. They could not coordinate their efforts. They could not tell each other what bricks were needed or where they should be placed. Frustration grew as their shared project ground to a halt. Eventually, they abandoned the city and the tower they had started. From this event, humanity learned an important lesson about humility. It showed that while working together is good, doing so with pride can lead to problems. It became clear that respecting limits and understanding that true unity comes from more than just shared language is important. Humility allows people to work together constructively and wisely. The people then dispersed across the face of the earth, each group speaking its own newly formed language. Though their great tower was never finished, humanity continued to learn, to build, and to live, carrying the memory of that time and the lesson of humility as they spread out.